And once again, I want to thank the group for the invitation to speak, and I want to welcome those that are going to join us next week for artificial insemination class in Deming. So I'm kind of combining a little bit of just basic genetic selection principles and incorporate a little bit of that into your AI program when you head to that level, okay, or when you start incorporating that in your management plan. I'm going to go ahead and get that going. All right. Okay, so there's two ways of thought when you are looking at purchasing your bulls or selecting your replacement heifers if you do purchase them. If you want to just get calves on the ground, that's fine because that pays the bills. And you can, with little data, you can get fairly less expensive bulls. But the unfortunate side of that is you increase your risk, particularly as it relates to your heifers. And then the other rule of thought is you want to really improve weaning weights. If you retain your calves, improve the carcass quality, that kind of thing. And you typically will pay a little more for those animals, but they should come with more information. And the key goal of that investment is that you're going to reduce your risk and improve your production. And so for the sake of the talk, I'm going to lean towards improving productivity because that's hopefully what everybody would like to accomplish. So there's a couple ways to do it, depending on what you have for resources. If you have a mixed herd with the heifers running with your cows, you can follow the arrows, and you really need to look for bulls that kind of take care of your young females, your heifers, but can also cover your cows. And so you look for calving ease bulls, low birth weight bulls, and we'll talk about what that means. They do tend to be a little bit more expensive, but it certainly reduces your risk in having to pull calves. If you have the option to split the groups, that gives you a lot more ways to fine-tune your breeding program, where you can maximize growth out of your cows and still take care of your females. For the AI group that's looking to learn that skill, the heifers tend to be the first place we go for that process. That way you can breed your heifers safely and then put a higher performing bull with larger birth weights sometimes on your cows. We call that kind of a terminal cross, okay? So as far as information that should come with a bull on purchase is a breed soundness exam, certainly that they're fertile. And also very important, a trichomoniasis test of negative before you introduce them to your cows. Ideally, you'll have some health history behind them as far as what has been their vaccination program, have they been BVD tested, some of those things. Structure is absolutely key, particularly in that rough country. You need something that can withstand that. And it is pretty heritable, so that's something to consider if you're trying to build a cow herd with that. Actual performance data, how much did they gain as calves? Are they feed efficient? This is a bit in my wheelhouse with the bull test that we run in Tucumcari, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But really, the one tool you have in your toolkit nowadays that is hugely important and proven to work is genetic information. And that's in the form of what's called EPDs and then the genomic testing. So in your AI sires, you can check all those boxes, right? So they're fully vetted. And when you go to select sires to breed to your cows AI, all that is well taken care of. Okay. So we are going to focus a bit on genetic improvement and how to get that done. And that can be applicable to really anyone, regardless of your breeding plans. So the goal is, how quickly can you achieve it? So technology obviously helps us get some of this done. Embryo transfer is kind of up there on that, but it's also very expensive and requires donor cows and recip cows, and it's a big undertaking, and not too many people do that nationwide. AI is available to anybody. It's once you learn it, it's a little bit like riding a bike. So it's a really nice technique to have, management to use, because it can really help gain that genetic improvement within one generation. Right now, only 30% of producers utilize EPDs in their selection process, and then less than that use artificial insemination. But it is effective, and we can see why it works. EPDs were genetic parameters that were established in the 80s. And since that time, people that utilize EPD data in making their selection choices, it works, right? We've seen an increase in yearling weights. We've seen kind of even off, this is Angus data, and granted it's 2011, a little dated, but you get the idea that when an association and their members focus on certain traits and where to improve upon those traits through EPDs, they get the appropriate response. And you can see in the Angus Association, for example, they knew that birth weights were important, but so was growth. And so they looked at how to build that trend downward on the birth weight and upward on the yearling weight. And EPDs are also a really good added piece of information, because you can look at a picture of a bull, or you can be in a pen of a bull's, and you really don't know without this information what kind of calves he's going to throw and how big. Will he in fact improve your weaning weights? How much milk will his daughters produce? That could ultimately be good or bad. And will he in fact improve the muscling of your calves? Now, certainly visually, he might be able to answer a few of those questions, but EPDs really dive a lot deeper than that. So EPD stands for expected progeny difference. Effectively, it is predicted performance of the future offspring of an animal, and for a particular trait, right? So we'll go through those a little bit. It's going to feel like a fire hose, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to chime in or chat it in, or certainly we can wait towards the end, because it can get a little complicated. But the goal is to understand what kind of calves this bull is going to throw, what kind of daughters will he help bring back into the herd. Okay, so his offspring effectively. Now, my purebred guys that I work with do a lot to help build these EPDs in the database of their respective breed associations. They collect a lot of what's called the phenotypic data, that's the stuff that you can measure, and that's what we do as well at the test. You can see this guy's weighing his calves. He's going to report that. He's going to report how easy she had that calf. And then depending on the association, all the other parameters that go towards that, pedigrees, and that genomics is playing a role in this as well. And it builds these numbers for these individual animals. So that calf that he's weighing right now will have a set of EPDs as soon as he's registered. So heritability is really important when you're kind of identifying traits that you want to maybe focus on, because you have both genetics and environmental factors at play. And the more the environment can impact an outcome, the less heritable that trait typically is. And then the opposite effect, the less the environment plays a role, the more heritable it is. So I talked about the phenotypic traits, or those that are measured and it's based off of the performance difference of the offspring versus their parents. Okay, so like I said, step one, kind of decide which direction you want to go, and then fine tune on what trait specific through EPD selection that you want to when you're out shopping bulls or females. So here's for replacements, or we call them maternal traits, that you'll find collectively. And in the left, I have the actual trait. In the middle is the EPD sign for that, or symbol, acronym, if you will. And then the type of number you want to look for, higher or lower. And then on the far right is the most important, in my opinion, is the heritability of that trait. Unfortunately, the fertility in general is very lowly heritable. You cannot pick a bull or a group of bulls and say, I'm going to improve fertility in my herd. And the reason that is there's so much management at play in terms of and environmental conditions at play. One misstep and you can have cow lose her calf, right? So fertility is really challenging there. We have what's called heifer pregnancy, and that is basically the age at which she will become pregnant at the rate that she will become pregnant. The Angus, that's the A, and RA is Red Angus, have this in their EPD lineup. And you want to look for a very positive number. But again, heritability is on the low side at 20 to 25%. That's on the low side. We have a lot of guys that like the idea of longevity. Red Angus and the Hereford Association have this as an EPD, but again, pretty lowly heritable. And the reason, again, that is, and you all well know it too well, unfortunately, drought wipes out a lot of young animals, regardless of how good their genetics are. And so not really one I look at. If I'm going to select maternal traits in a bull, I don't really look at the longevity. And I've got some other reasons as to why that is that I'll explain down the road, but it's not one that I really pay too much attention to because I'm not going to make any progress there. What is important, the next two traits are very important in terms of your heifers. You have birth weight, beta, and all breeds have this. And all breeds have a calving ease, direct. Birth weight's slightly more heritable than calving ease. Calving ease is basically a combination of the score that the producer gives in terms of how easily that cow calved, but also has to do with hip and shoulder design of the bull. And then birth weights obviously play a role. And so the combination of those two are something to look at when you're evaluating bulls for sale. You want a negative or very low number on your birth weight and a very high number on your calving ease. The one that gets a lot of attention in New Mexico, and justifiably so, is milk. And you're looking for a positive value in your milk EPDs. All breeds have them, and they are moderately heritable. Now, I say positive is the number you look at, but you also want to look at moderation. If you go too much to the right or too high in that value in one of your bulls, that should be a red flag, because for New Mexico, it's really challenging for his daughters to keep that pace up and be able to rebreed. If you're too positive on your milk, there is some research that indicates you give up reproduction, and it has to do with just the energy demand that you're asking that cow to do, because she will try and meet her genetic potential. Okay, and then maternal ability is really important, very heritable. I don't pay attention to it really on the EPDs because you know your cows better than anybody. You know how maternal they are, and if you have cows or heifers reject their calves, they need to go. Just keep that in the back of your mind. This is a very heritable trait. She's not going to become a better mom over time, and she will carry it on to her daughters. And so that's more on the manager side or the owner side to pay attention to that rather than worry about it too much on the EPD side, in my opinion. That's just my personal opinion. And then this is what pays the bills for a lot of people is growth. These are your growth parameters. Weaning weight obviously is one of them. Milk production does tie into that. So you will see a correlation of higher weaning weights with high milk, but other things are at play there. It is fairly heritable, but this is not really one I pay too close attention to because, again, the environment can really do a whammy on that in terms of holding back those calves from maximizing their weaning weights. What I try and pay attention to are post-weaning gains or yearling weights because they're very highly heritable and it trickles back to the growth ability of that calf while he's on mom. Okay, you likely aren't going to have those animals at a yearling or year of age, excuse me. But because it's more heritable, and I know I want growth in those calves that I'm not keeping, that's the number I tend to weigh over weaning weight in terms of evaluating EPDs. The next thing that's kind of come on in the last 10 years or so is feed efficiency. We have in the Angus breed what's called RADG, residual average daily gain. And basically you want a positive number there because it reflects the fact that this animal will grow more on the same amount of inputs, okay? Other breeds are embracing what's called RFI or residual feed intake value, and you want a negative number or a very low number there. And the inference of that is you're going to get the same production with less inputs. And for New Mexico, that bodes pretty well. And so this feed efficiency, it can be relatively heritable. I've seen it at the bull test where brothers of very efficient previously tested bulls also test very well in efficiency. At 30 and 35 to 40%, you're talking moderate to good heritability. Finally, we look at carcass. Similar to milk, if you were to focus too much on carcass, you might ultimately sacrifice reproduction, and we don't really want to do that. However, 80 to 90% of your calves leave the ranch, right? And you're paid on how heavy those calves are, the muscle score of those calves. So this is a trait that you want to pay attention to, maybe in a line of cows that you're not planning on keeping females out of. You can go ahead and look at this trait because you will be rewarded for doing so. Across the board, carcass weight, ribeye, marbling, all really well heritable. I like ribeye of this group simply due to the fact that, yes, it is more heritable, but that gives you the nice muscle look to that animal, the muscle structure of that animal. They're going to have nice big loin eyes. And so that'll have a lot of eye appeal to your buyers. And you can do this in the next year of utilizing these bulls. So you will see that in their calves almost immediately. All right, now we get to the crazy part. So bear with me, and I'm sorry if the screen's a little fuzzy. But again, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to stop or stop me. All right, so, and this is applied more to, say, an AI sire versus, say, a yearling. Okay, most of the bull sales this year, you're going to have yearlings to 18 months, bulls that have really no progeny on the ground, right? So they have no other data to support their trait values. But when you are evaluating bulls, whether they're yearlings or AI sires, you want to look at this line right here, and it says EPD, which it gives the top row, and down below, hopefully you can make it out, it says ACC, and what that stands for is accuracy. And this is your insurance policy, if you will. This is going to tell you that, yes, this bull will produce calves that are really good in their yearling weight, really good in their carcass. They'll produce nice females. They will be safe on using them on heifers. And so with a yearling that has not been genetically tested, that accuracy is like 0.1 to 0.5 or 0.15, okay? Now, you'll notice here that these accuracies are a little higher. This bull's been genomically tested as a yearling. And what the importance of knowing if a bull's been genomically tested does for you, it is equivalent, stay with me. So if he has a genomic test on him, it is equivalent to 1 calf crop. Okay, so that data has already been generated. So he has a little more insurance, not a lot, but a little more insurance versus a bull that has not been genomically tested on the respective traits, that he will do what his numbers are telling you on these EPDs. Okay, so for example, hopefully you can see my arrow. This bull appears to be pretty decent in his calving ease. He's a little low. I mean, he's a 0.9 on birth weight. You know, I'm not too sure that I would use him on first calf heifers, but I wouldn't be afraid to use him on smaller cows. And then yearling weight, he's got a lot of growth on that, and he's probably pretty efficient. And so on down the line, I think you'll find this bull to be pretty good to use for cows for sure. Okay. But that accuracy is really important. And why is it important? Okay, so here's an example of 2 bulls. One has an accuracy for yearling weight of 0.8, and the other one has an accuracy of 0.4. So my suspicion is this sire A is maybe a 2-year-old with a little bit of data in his back pocket, or sire B is a seasoned sire with a lot more data in his database. And you can see the chance of him throwing what he says he's going to throw in terms of yearling weight is a lot tighter in the bell curve across a population of calves versus the younger bull. Here, it's all over the map. It's going to have a lot more to do with the cow. So you'll have more yearling weight. You'll have ultimately more weaning weight in these calves out of this bull, okay, because his data is a lot more accurate. Okay. And it all comes back to data that goes back to the association off of progeny. So here is an AI sire, and he's long dead, but one benefit of AI, you can use them as long as there's a supply of him, and I don't know that there is with Median Focus, but he was good all around for a lot of things, and he got very popular very early on. And so he got a lot of progeny as a young bull at 3 years old. By 4 years old, he was pulling accuracies of this 0.9. Let's see. You can see its accuracies for calving ease of 0.9, 0.99 for birth weight. He's also really good in his efficiency, and he was just good all around bull. Very historic bull with a lot of bloodlines now that come out of him. And so that is the big value of AI and utilizing AI sires. You know what you're going to get, and you can literally, I would rather go through an AI catalog than like a clothing catalog because I'm weird, but you can just see the trends and the traits and how good these bulls really are. So this was a sire that was used quite a little last year, and he's being used again this year at the test. And so it was interesting to find him and look at his EPDs and compare them to the bulls that were on test. And I can tell you, just based on my personal experience, that he threw what he said he was going to throw. Really attractive, excellent carcass traits. His docility was off the charts, the bulls that were there. Which is getting to be more and more important for a lot of folks. Just an all-around, balanced calf in his numbers. And why do I say he's balanced? So you can use him on young females with a negative birth weight and a positive calving ease. He's very positive in his efficiency and we'll talk about rank in a minute, but in the 2 percentile of efficiency, this residual average daily gain, he will convert feed. And so that's what we want to look at. His carcass weight's very, meaning cutability is really good. Milk at 31 would make a lot of people nervous, but it could work depending on your situation. And so on down the line, and we'll explain like what some of these others are. And I know I'm probably talking a lot too fast, but because there's a lot of information on these EPDs, and the Angus Association is guilty of creating a phone book size of EPDs. They keep adding more all the time, including this claw, which is foot and foot angle. This is, and then a PAP score for high altitude. So these are some new traits on their list that you could also look at. Okay. So what I really encourage people to do when they're selecting bulls, whether it be AI or just natural, and you're hitting those bull sales, see where they sit. This means doing your homework on that particular trait. Are they average? Are they above average? Are they below average? And that's how you should maybe make your selections, right? So if you're really hunting for a Cavanese bull for your heifers, you would want to find bulls with numbers up in this range, right? Of above 11 is probably pretty safe. Same is true with birth weights being very negative. And again, I use Angus a lot. That's kind of my comfort zone, but other breeds, we're going to show you how this works with them as well. And it goes on down the line, what numbers you want to look at on their EPD values and where they would sit as a individual within an association, okay? So I put this in our catalog as these are the breeds that we typically have at our test, and not all EPDs are the same, okay? So a +6 for Angus is average, right? Well, you go over to Hereford, a +5 for Cavanese is in the top percentile. So this is where I encourage you to breed of choice, breed of preference. You go to their website and you try, I'm going to see if I can back up here. They should all have charts very similar to this to show you where the rankings fall on those EPDs and what those numbers look like, to kind of know what you're dealing with. And so I always provide this in our sales so they know, yeah, this calf is sort of average for weaning weight in the Herefords, or he's exceptional for yearling weight, right? And so that's really important process in selecting bulls when you're at a sale, looking at a catalog, or simply buying from someone direct. So indexes are nice. They're basically formulas that compile several traits into one number. And that makes it very clean. You don't have to evaluate this versus that. You can just sort of look at one number. So that makes it somewhat easier to sort of navigate. But again, Angus is notorious for just keep adding these. We started with dollar beef and dollar W, and now, and there's more than this. There's dollar F, this is just some of them, okay? So, but this is something, these to me represent sort of the commercial indexes for commercial breeders. We have maternal M for maternal, okay? And then that's for your herd replacement value. And all of these, you want to look for a higher number. The higher number, the better. The one that's truly unique is this dollar EN. It has more to do with the maintenance cost of a cow. And so they really look at lactation or their milk EPDs, the mature size, and then what it would cost to maintain that. And that's kind of where this value comes from. So it's probably the most unique out of all of these. I don't really look at this often. personally. Some like to look at it as an efficiency value. It's a good way to, if you're wanting to raise efficient females, that would be one you'd want to look in to on the bulls you're selecting in Angus. And they've got, I just sort of tongue in cheek, dollar C is literally dollar combined, and it has to do with just about every trait you can think of. And then by the time you're adding so many traits, you're just muddying the waters, in my opinion. And it's really hard to define what exactly he's good in because there's too much information into one value. So I'm personally not a fan of the dollar C. My guys really like dollar W because that's what pays the bills. And then dollar B is also desirable because those calves typically make, that's where you're going to start to see better muscling in those calves, better weaning weights in those calves, and they're going to be more desirable for your buyers. Hereford also has dollar indexes. I'm gonna look and see. And so dollar BMI is what they're kind of known for, as being a Baldy cross, so Baldy maternal. And then they have the dollar BII, so crossing them with the Indicus to get those nice stripy cows. That would be one you could look at to see how well they would pair. That particular bull would pair with your cows. But the one that really is most similar to the dollar B and Angus would be the dollar CHB. Similar parameters. They don't necessarily take into account all the things that the dollar B value does, but the concept is the same. They've just simplified it. So you're probably feeling like this about now, and I apologize. But like I said, the discussion piece is really important to address any questions you might have. So at the end, please feel free to do so. In talking about, and this doesn't matter if you're going to learn AI or not, these AI catalogs are tremendous. If you can get a hold of one, you can likely order one. They're viewable online at the various companies. They really are a good source of information. They talk about the new traits. They'll talk about what's, the value of those traits. You can look at kind of what the trends are within a multitude of breeds that they carry. And so it just kind of gives you a really nice overview of some really good cattle. And it can also, as you were shopping for AI sires, clearly it's going to give you that as well. The bulls tend to be the ones that they like, the ones that, they think you all should buy into are typically ones that are highlighted with photos and more information. Doesn't necessarily mean they cost more. It just means that they think they're really good. And the experts that go around, this is actually a job I wouldn't, but they go around and they vet these bulls at different operations. They find the ones they like. And if a producer has the good fortune of having a bull selected as an AI sire, that's a very prestigious thing to have. All right. So as you're going through, and again, this is on the AI piece for selecting, you want to make sure you're not going to spend $85 a straw or $100 a straw on the get-go, because new technicians, success rates around the 50 percentile. So that is something to consider. But you do want to ultimately keep your goals in mind, but do so economically. So you want the bull to make sense. You want to know that he is vetted, and that his numbers look like they'll fit your program, but he's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. Like this particular bull was $25, which is about average for the cost of a straw of semen. But cheapest is not always best. I know on the dairy side, they will buy $5 straws just to put a calf in the cow. But that's not the primary goal of that production system, right? So you want to balance quality and price. I'm going to talk a little bit about age of genetics here because that's something to think about regardless of AI or if you're going to go buy cattle. I love Neil Burcham, for those of you that knew him. He's an interesting man, but him and I disagreed on our selection philosophies a little bit. So he really promoted cows that were 14 years old. Okay, that's great. It has shown longevity. That cow can withstand her environment and be successful in her fertility. And she's well paid for herself. So all of that is good. What is a challenge with some of these older genetics, or if you find some sires in the AI program that are like Midian Focus, even long since gone, but might have some semen back, their EPDs are no longer relevant to today's trends. We've come a long way. We continue to progress in our production system in terms of efficiency and growth. And those cows that were raised 14 years ago have very different genetics than the cows that are born today. And so though longevity really does pay bills, if you are looking to change something in the genetics of your herd, that's something to think about. All right, so this is a shameless plug, but I have a point. So our sale is this Saturday, and we are extremely data-driven. Particularly my producers that are involved here, they every month they're on me the day after we weigh these bulls. Did you get the report yet? Did you get the report yet? And so you're going to see a lot of information coming out. In some ways, it might be a little too much. Honestly, it's just a lot. But that said, I'm going to move her up a little bit so I can see what I'm talking about here. So this is a report that I give. This is the Angus group. We have, like I said, several breeds. And our top indexing bull, this is just to give you the level of performance that is today's performance, not 10 years ago even. This bull converted over 5 pounds a day over 120 days. And he ate less than 5 pounds of feed per pound of gain to get it done. You don't get this kind of performance without good selection processes. And the process works, I guess, is my take-home message of this slide. And just our top 30 bulls, their lowest gaining was almost 4.5 pounds. So, and the group as a whole averaged 4, sorry. And when I look back at the older records from when this test first started, our average gain was 3 pounds a day on a very hot ration. And the yearling weights or the sale weights were about 800 pounds. And it took 10 pounds of feed to get a pound of gain. And so we have made progress through selection, but it does take information. Information is power, right? And it does work. So, and this is the second indexing calf. I just put him aside to just show you where we've been in our selection. When you utilize data, whether it be EPDs or actual hard data, it will help improve your production in your herd, and you can do it very quickly depending on the trait that you select for. So yeah, overall, when you collectively add together the added gain and the conversion, we've improved efficiency by 40%, which is pretty significant. And that's a bad picture of him. It's a video that I kind of tried to screenshot. He's much better looking than that. So who are you breeding, right? What are you breeding? Heifers? Are you breeding cows? Can you split them up? Is it both together? That's really going to start off with your elimination process of selecting a bull. What are your goals? Do you need a little more weaning weight? Are you trying to raise a few more females? That kind of thing. And try and select few traits that best meet those goals. Oops, that got cut off. So you can really back yourself into a corner if you do a single trait or just 2 trait focus. For example, calving ease actually can get you in a little bit of trouble. If you continue to put low birth weight, calving ease bulls on your cows, they're gonna, and you keep the daughters out of those cows, they're gonna in part have smaller hips in some ways. And so you can really pigeonhole yourself into a calving problem, ironically or not, if you tend to focus too much on that. Or like I said, if you say, well, I'm just going to focus on carcass, and then you're going to give up reproduction. Okay, so there's a give and take. But and then conversely, if you pick too many traits, then it just sort of washes everything out. So select a few that you know is going to benefit you the best, and see how that can go. How does the EPD bill, so you got to do your homework, whether you go to the website of the associations, hopefully, you get some information from your breeders that where do these bulls rank within breeds. Some of it would be posted on the actual paperwork. What are the accuracies? Now, like I said, most yearlings aren't going to have very good accuracies because they don't have any progeny to speak of. But if they've been genomic tested, that would be a question to ask. You get a little better insurance that, yes, he is a Cavanese bull, or yes, he is good in his carcass. Okay. And then the AI catalogs, whether you AI or not, are really kind of interesting to go through, and they give you the latest and greatest in genetics and also estrus synchronization protocols and the like. Clearly can't use the same bull year after year after year, as you will start to, if you're keeping those females back, you do get some line breeding, you lose that hybrid vigor. I'm not going to say you're going to get two-headed calves or three-tailed calves, but you will lose what's very important to your bottom line, and that's that extra growth you get out of that first cross. It just gets blended out, right? All of that performance gets blended down the more you use a bull on the same cows and breed back to his daughters and so on. But we have come a long way. Went from, the Aberdeen lines where the guys were a good 2 feet taller than the mature bull to the giants of the 80s. And now we're back to moderation and deep and high performing animals. And again, that all goes back to selection through the use of EPDs and a combination of data and structure. So it's a lot, right? To make that very important investment. But it's an important one because one bull's genetics will cover at least 20 cows, depending on your situation. And so he does make an impact for sure.
Thank
Okay.
you. You guys have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can insert your questions in the chat box. I gotta say, your pictures right here is really nostalgic because I see a lot of them during county fairs. Yeah, no, Bi County has all the memory from the gray and white picture up in the corner all the way down to the current year of the winners. So definitely I see this a lot.
Yeah, and when you look at even all the data from the bull test, it's interesting just to see when the Simmentals started coming in was about in the 70s. A lot more continental were used, and then the shift went about when certified Angus beef came out, everything had to be black. And now we're seeing a little more diversification. So pretty interesting to see the trends change.
Yeah, definitely. Not only do I see this in steers, but in sheep as well, but definitely a big change. Um, anybody on the chat has any questions, or you're more than welcome to unmute yourself if there are no other questions. Okay, Dustin, see you're unmuted.
Yes, thank you, Michaela. And thank you, Dr. Ward, for the presentation. I had a question in regards to elevation. Does that, do I really, I ranch around 6,600 to, if we take them down to the Vicente area, that's 6,500. So do I really have to pay attention to that elevational change when I'm picking bulls and all that?
Yeah, it is important. It is pretty heritable. Angus right now is the only one that has a PAP value. A lot of the like Simmentals really don't struggle with that a whole lot. A lot of those continental breeds don't typically have issues there. Um, but that PAP score is important. As an example, we had bulls go from Texas to Tucumcari. That's not a big push, right? From like 3,000 feet to 4,000 feet, and one broke with brisket, and his heart was the size of a football when we posted, not football, but volleyball when we posted him. And the producer did say his PAP score was terrible, or his PAP EPD. He wasn't actually PAP scored, but his PAP EPD was quite bad. So this year we are hosting a high altitude bull sale up in Abiquiu. And those bulls will have been up there at 6,500 feet for 60 days. And we have a veterinarian that got herself certified in PAP diagnosis. And so those bulls will be physically PAP tested for that sale. So you'll know exactly kind of how they handled that. But yes, that is important because they do pass it on, and to lose animals to brisket's pretty challenging. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ward.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? If not, then I'm going to release a poll. So if all of you can go ahead and complete that poll for me, I really appreciate it. It's just give us an idea of how you rate this presentation today of Dr. Marcy Ward and what you'd like to see as far as future workshop goes. And most of you on here are pretty new. So I'm not sure if you guys are all coming from the AI program. If you are, or you can put down where it says chapter affiliation or county where you're chiming in. You can put Luna County or Doniana County, wherever you're chiming in from. So it kind of gives us an idea of where all of our folks are chiming in, and get an overview of where everyone is coming in from and participating in our webinars and such.